Hello and welcome to the July 29th edition of the Paperboyz, a half-hour discussion of major issues, topics in the sports world with the Courier Sports Department. I am Assistant Sports Editor Jim Sullivan, filling in for the vacationing Doug Newhoff. To my right is Nick Petaros, and to my left is Jim Nelson. And in honor of the fact that it's July 29th, let's start with what happened in this date in history. Nick, take off.
All right. Well, this day in 1984, the Summer Olympics opened in Los Angeles, and that was, we've had Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City, and then the Summer Games in Atlanta. And the thing that's kind of interesting is just this week we found out that Boston will no longer be the U.S. bid for the 2024 games, and there's talk that those might the USOC might go with LA as the host destination there, just with the infrastructure they already have in place in that city. So it'll be interesting to see if the Olympics will come back to the United States anytime soon.
For those of us who are old enough to remember this, 1984, of course, was the year of the retaliatory boycott by the Soviet Union, as it was then known. They chose not to come to LA for the 84 games because we did not go to the Summer Games in Moscow 4 years earlier. Hence, we had, tainted wouldn't be the right word, but certainly the field was diluted across the board. And Carl Lewis made Hader in that Olympics. That's where the world got to know Mary Lou Retton and on her way to the Wheaties box. And it was an eventful Olympics, if not always for the right reasons. And of course, the last time the Summer Games were held in United States soil was Atlanta. Michael Johnson had a tremendous Olympics, and of course we had the tragedy with the bombing. So we've had eventful games here, if not always games that have been giving us what we wanted. Do we know, one more thing, do we know who else is in the running from the United States?
For the 2024 games, I don't think we do. I think it was going to be Boston, and they withdrew the Boston bid this week, and so now they're looking for a replacement city.
Okay, well, let's move on to a couple other topics of more local interest, and beginning with the state softball tournament. We had one team from our coverage area win in dominant fashion. That was AGWSR. And let's start with that. Nick, how good was this team? You've been covering this tournament for a while. What was impressed you the most about the way they went about their business?
Well, I think the big thing with them was their experience. They had 6 seniors on that team, and it's a team that had been to the state semifinals each of the previous 2 years. So they were as experienced as any team that was down there. And especially at the Class 1A level, if you can have a horse that can kind of help guide you through, you can have a lot of success. And Ashley Sykard, their pitcher, not only their best, a great pitcher, but also one of their best hitter. She had a game in the semifinals for the ages there where she threw a no-hitter and hit 2 home runs in the same game, and she is the first player to ever accomplish that feat at the state softball tournament. And then in the finals against a very good Logan Magnolia offense, didn't let them get on the scoreboard through what was a mercy rule shortened 3-inning game there.
It's interesting you should bring up the mercy rule. Of course, as you said, that was in effect that game, which kind of it begs the question, should it be used in a state tournament? We don't know. It's entirely possible there could have been a comeback there. Stranger things have happened. What do you think? Should we have a mercy rule in a state championship game?
I think you can see it from both ways, though. But to me, looking at 12-0, I don't think they're coming back. I mean, stranger things happen, like you said. But on the other end, you could look at it is it sounded like Logan Magnolia's pitcher was struggling with having sweaty hands, and she couldn't keep them dry. And I mean, it could have went the other way. It could have ended up 24-0 if they decided to go. And do you want that in your title game too? I guess if you want to really look at both ends of the spectrum. But yeah, it's a 3-inning game. You hope to see a state title game go longer than 3 innings.
Well, just covering the game is one of those things that you're just thinking, wow, this got done quick. 3 innings. It's not what you expect. And Logan Magnolia in the first round, they actually beat Don Bosco by the mercy rule. So that's a team that can score runs quick. So who's to say maybe they don't make a run? What I would almost like to see is they do a coin flip to determine who the home team is. If they have the higher seed as a home team, that would, in theory, give the better team that third at bat. So they bat in the 3rd inning, and then if you extend the mercy rule to 4 innings, then you're giving the visiting team a 4th at bat to try to get within the 12 runs. And if they don't get within the 12 runs, then you call it for the mercy rule there. But I think if you seed it and give, in theory, the worst team an extra at bat in the 4th inning, that could help extend the game a little bit and make it a little bit more enjoyable. I think where you run into problems is when the better team's hitting first and then they bat around at the top of an inning, and then it can escalate quick there.
And Nick, you brought up another interesting thing that happened at the state softball tournament, kind of a strange ending to a game involving Waverly Shell Rock, where the Go Hawks were trying to walk a batter intentionally, and the pitch was wild, and the runner scored from third in walk-off fashion. And that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that. I'd forgotten that because in high school baseball, of course, all you have to do is tell the guy that he walks to first, and that's it. No harm, no foul. So the question is, should it be a consistent rule? Should a softball pitcher be required to throw 4 pitches to the plate, or can they just single up the free pass?
I thought it was kind of an interesting play. First of all, heads up to the Creston runner that was on third base to have the wherewithal to get home on there, because you're not expecting a wild pitch in that situation. There had already been a pitch out, so to speak, for the intentional walk. So you just kind of think of it as a routine play. But I was reading a quote from the Creston coach afterwards saying that he felt like the Waverly pitcher was holding on to the ball too long and to keep on her toes, and just a really good heads-up play. I kind of like that you have to throw 4 pitches home. I think, especially when there's a runner on first too, you give them a chance to maybe try to steal a base. You have some options there, but it should require 4 balls for a walk, so you have to find a way to get 4 balls across the plate. I think they do it in baseball maybe just to speed up the game, but I don't really know how much it speeds up the game by the 4 pitches or not, the free pass. But I'm actually in favor of the 4 pitches for the intentional walk there.
And it's easy probably to backseat coach now, but instead of having maybe your catcher stand up, just have him set up another box and have the girl throw 4 fastballs way outside, and the girl's not going to swing at him. But the chances are, because it's unnatural a lot of times. They're peppering softball pitchers, the really good ones. They're going to hit their spot almost every time. But when you make a catcher stand up, this is a totally foreign thing to him, and if you don't practice that maybe a whole lot, intentionally walking somebody. So like I said, it's easy to backseat coach now, but it might have been the best if they just moved the catcher way outside and thrown 4 balls way outside, and something that the girl was swinging at. So
this has nothing to do with high school baseball or softball per se, but in my youth way back in the middle of the 20th century, I remember a famous World Series game in 1972, Reds and Oakland, where Oakland faked as if it was going to walk Johnny Bench intentionally. I don't remember it completely, but I believe the catcher stepped out, and then whoever was pitching for Oakland threw it right over the plate, and Bench struck out with a bat in the shoulder. So it does add that element of uncertainty if you actually throw 4 pitches. Moving along to another baseball topic, let's go to the state baseball tournament at Principal Park in Des Moines. So far, it's been more notable for rain than the play in the field. That said, we've had a couple locals do very well. Columbus won its opener impressively. Waverly Shell Rock did the same, and we have some pretty good teams left on the board. I'm not sure how much you two gentlemen have had a chance to follow it, but assuming that you have, what have you liked so far from what's happened? Rain, no rain, etc.
Well, one thing that's been kind of neat is they're showing the games on TV, and I think that's been a nice component, having all rounds being televised. And I know that the quality of the production might not be the best, but it is kind of neat for these kids to have the opportunity to play in front of a crowd on TV there. And I think when you look at that Columbus team, it just seems like they've been on a pretty incredible run. Their defense for both teams, actually, them and Waverly Shell Rock's been kind of what's carried them through, being able to hold their opposition to 0 in both games. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
And, there was 4 straight shutouts.
Yes,
I think it was the first time in the 70-year history of the state tournament, and I thought that was crazy. You just don't see that happen. Somebody's going to squeak a run across here or there. I mean, Columbus in their shutout, Hinton had several chances there, but Farley really worked his way out of the several jams, really in the first couple innings, I believe. Right,
and Alex Robeson had a very, very good game for Waverly Shell Rock yesterday in its first round win. Only 2 runners, Vin Schellsberg runners reached base in 1 inning, and that was it. And he was pretty dominant. Now they go on, weather permitting, to the semifinal round, and Columbus has Cascade, and Cascade is one of the best teams in the state. Great offense, a very stingiest pitching staff in Class 2A. Waverly Shell Rock, we don't know who they have yet. As we tape, they are finishing up the first round of the Class 3A tournament, and if you haven't been following that end of it, as I mentioned a few moments ago, rain disrupted the tournament Monday for 5 hours. Tuesday, the association, Iowa High School Athletic Association, scheduled 5 games. 2 were actually played, 3 were postponed, and 2 of those were moved to Southeast Polk High School in Runnels, where they have artificial turf. And so they've had some making up to do. It's kind of complicated matters. Along those lines, at the 4A level, which is going on today, the Waterloo-Cedar Falls schools have not gone there since West went in 2007. They've had several chances. Cedar Falls, of course, is in the sub-state final a week ago and lost to Kennedy, Cedar Rapids Kennedy. And my question would be, how big a deal is that, and what do you think has to happen before these East-West Cedar Falls can get over the hump and get down to Principal Park?
I think Cedar Falls got a pretty good young core there, and I think they'll be back again next year. But you look at East and West, they're ways off. I think their combined record this year was 6-69, so they got some work to do. And I think it starts. They got to develop some pitchers. They haven't particularly pitched very well, and the hitting hasn't been there either. So I mean, it's one they got to find. There's something missing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's at the developmental level, if what's going on with travel ball. You see a lot of the Des Moines area suburbs. Kids are now going to Kansas City. They're going out of state to find competition. It seems like, that's getting more and more intense. I'm not sure if there's something going on there that's different with what's going on in the Cedar Valley. But, Cedar Falls, it seems like it's always been kind of close, but still there's a pretty big gap in that game where they're trying to play to go to state, and they had to survive an extra inning game just to get to that round too. So you wonder how close they are as well.
It's interesting because facilities, I think, are adequate here. I think West has got a good solid field. East is fine. Cedar Falls is fine. So that's not an issue. And I think it maybe does suggest that in a developmental standpoint, there are some things that have to be done. Certainly there has to be depth built, I think, along both rosters. I see a lot of young kids playing, and you want to see kids come up through the system ready to play and ready to also learn how to play at the high school level. But you need a lot of pitching. I mean, that's the bottom line. You can't get through a high school season with just one good pitcher. You need several, and you need the guys to fill in at the bottom of the rotation for the non-conference games. So there is some work to be done there.
Yeah, you look at, you wonder, I thought the interesting part of your story with the Waverly is the Alex Robson who threw a shutout in the first round. Pitched 5 innings last year as a junior. And now, you're looking at, you wonder how many, with as many young players as West and East is playing, and maybe they're just not getting the seniors out, but you wonder if you're running off some of those kids that didn't get a chance to play, and they're just not coming back because you're playing sophomores and freshmen. And, maybe the kid that wasn't was on the border as a junior, maybe he's going to be that guy in the senior, but if he realizes he's not going to play, he might not come back. You wonder if, I'm throwing really, a lot of darts there to look at some issues, but you wonder if because they've had to go to freshmen and sophomores, whether they've lost some of the seniors or juniors and seniors potentially.
Maybe they have. In the case of Waverly Shellrock, to some degree, success breeds success. Casey Clunder brought this up yesterday. Last year when the Go Hawks went down there, they brought all the sophomores with them. They just had them watch from the dugout. And he believes that helped them through the postseason this year. They were able to see the state tournament experience, witness it very close, and he thinks that got them through some tough competition in the district at the sub-state level. And that Alex Robeson, well, he's a senior this year, not a junior. He said he also benefited from that. So certainly having that exposure as a young player helps. Now, whether that affects the other seniors on the roster, that I don't know, but you would hope that they would find some way to stay with the program, to enjoy the experience of being on a high school team, and hopefully contribute to success down the road. Continuing on with a little bit of baseball, we are in the middle of the Major League Baseball trading deadline period. The deadline is Friday at 3 o'clock, and things have heated up a little bit, of course. We've had Johnny Cueto change teams to the Royals, something that probably didn't make Jim Nelson particularly happy, but he's a Reds fan. The Royals have made another deal for Ben Zobrist. There's some deals going on as we tape. I think Matt Latos is about to change teams. Jonathan Papelbon changed teams. And one thing about this, let's go this way first. Of the deals you've seen so far, what's caught your eye?
Well, the Papelbon one we were talking about a little bit earlier this morning is pretty interesting because you have a guy that's kind of known as a clubhouse cancer, doesn't get along great with a lot of his teammates, and he's gone to Washington and says, I'm going to be the closer, make me the closer. Well, you have Drew Storen in there who's been doing an excellent job as their closer this season, and it sounds like he's going to get bumped, and you just have to wonder how that's going to play within that team.
Exactly. The big one, I thought, it was interesting to see Troy Tulowitzki go to the Toronto for Jose Reyes. That was probably a splash that nobody really saw coming. But it was basically, trading 2 superstar shortstops. I wonder how that's going to, if that makes Toronto better and makes it contender. Because Toronto as I understand, needs a starting pitcher, and they went out and got another piece of offense when they're pretty good offensively right now.
The crazy thing with the Tulo thing is that guy's been pretty much a franchise player for that Rockies franchise, and you feel like they owed it to him to treat him better. He gets pulled in the ninth inning of that game against the Cubs, and he had no idea it was coming. You saw that photo of him in the dugout, and his face, he was just stunned. It was unbelievable to see something like that where you have a star player, that gets dealt in the middle of a game and just kind of got blindsided that now he's going to be moving to Canada.
Did the Reds get enough for Johnny Cueto?
I liked what they got. Now it's all depending, it's all relative, but they got prospects. But I like the Finnegan guy, Brandon Finnegan. He was a key cog last year in the Royals' run to the World Series, and he, he's not a very big left-hander. He might be the left-handed, but he throws hard. He might be the left-handed Tim Lincecum, because he's 5'11", but he throws like 97, 98 miles an hour. I think the John Lamb guy, he's 25 years old, but he was a former #1 pick for the Royals, I believe, one of their top picks. And he had Tommy John surgery, and it took 2 or 3 years for him to come back, but he's having a huge year this year in the minor leagues. And the other guy was one of their top prospects too. So, it was going to happen one way or another. They were going to lose Johnny Cueto, whether it was they got him, and I think they got the best value they're going to get for him.
One of the interesting things about this time of year, too, with the trade deadline is you can go back over Major League Baseball history and find all sorts of names that have moved, also the trades that were made, some worked, some didn't. And I thought we would pursue that, explore that a little bit. What's your favorite deadline deal of all time? And Nelly, I think you've got a pretty good day in one in history for us.
Well, I got a couple. I was looking up the worst trades in Major League Baseball history. There's some you can think about. You'll go back to January 3rd, 1920. Now, this wasn't a trade deadline, but the Red Sox owner, Harry Frazier, really wasn't a baseball guy. He was a Broadway guy. Well, he was short on money for his play, no Nanette, so he decided to trade Babe Ruth, a left-handed pitcher at the time, to the New York Yankees for $100,000 to finance his play. So that and then for the next 86 years, the Red Sox don't win a World Series. And then you look at let's go back 1900. This is 1900 here. This is the Reds, my famed Reds, traded Christy Mathewson, who was an original Hall of Famer, for a guy named Amos Rosie, who hadn't been in the league for 2 years, and he lasted all of 22 innings. And Mathewson goes on to throw 434 complete games in his career, and he's in the original 1936 Baseball Hall of Fame. But but some of the worst ones, I was looking at, we got a Cubs fan here, we got a Twins fans here, and the Reds fan. The Reds probably worst trade. People call this one of the worst trades in the history. Was in 1965, Reds general manager Bill DeWitt famously said that Frank Robinson was an old 30, and he traded Robinson a year after he led the Reds to the World Series, and then the next season to the Orioles. And the next season, Robinson leads the Orioles to the World Series title, and he hits 49 home runs, bats in 122, and with batted .316, and it was Baltimore's first ever World Series win. So apparently he wasn't that old at 30. And he went on to play until another 7 seasons.
Yes, he was a thorn on the side of my Twins back in the day. One of the other things that's kind of interesting is how many of these deals involve the Cubs, considering the Cubs have not always been contenders. And the Cubs pop up a lot of times in this, and the Ernie Broglio, Lou Brock deal is one of those.
Yeah, well, the Cubs, sometimes, it's not a coincidence that they haven't won a World Series in so long. And the Brock Broglio one is an interesting one because that took place in '64, and at the time, people thought maybe the Cubs were getting the better end of that. Brock had been kind of a disappointment for the Cubs. Broglio had been a reliable pitcher for the Cardinals. Always interesting when two rival teams trade. You have to think the GM on one of those teams is thinking he's going to get the better of the deal, or he's not going to trade a good player to a rival. But anyways, that same season in '64, Brock ends up finding a second wind and hits 348 for the Cardinals, leads them to a World Series. And then he led them to another World Series in '67 and goes through a career where he, amasses over 3,000 hits and becomes a Hall of Famer. Broglio, meanwhile, he goes 4-7 with a 4.04 ERA for the Cubs, and he was out of baseball by 1966. So 2 years after that deal was made, Broglio was gone.
Mm-hmm. And it's great fun to look some of these up, and it's amazing to see what happens with some of these. And just a couple other ones involving the Cubs. That one of this I think is surprisingly overlooked, and that's the Rick Sutcliffe deal in 1984 when he went from Cleveland to Chicago for two outfielders, Mel Hall and Joe Carter. And I distinctly remember Harry Carey at the time raving about Mel Hall and about Joe Carter. They were going to be the future of the Cubs. Well, they were the future, but just futures and the future in other further teams, specifically the Indians. And Joe Carter wouldn't see his moment in the sun until about a decade later when he hit the walk-off home run that gave the '93 World Series to the Blue Jays. And of course, I am a Twins fan, so I've had some exposure to trades at the deadline that have worked and some that have not. And one that kind of sticks out to me is one that happened 26 years ago. Frank Viola, 1 year removed from a Cy Young, was unhappy with his contract. There was some bad feeling there, so the Twins unloaded him to the New York Mets for several pitchers. The three prominent names: Rick Aguilera, Kevin Tapani, and David West. Aguilera, of course, became the Twins' closer. Tapani became a reliable starter for the 1991 World Series team, and David West actually was a vital component of that bullpen later on that year before moving on to Philadelphia, where he again became a valuable relief pitcher for a World Series team. And on that note, we're about ready to close. I will offer one other item in terms of baseball and rain delays. A very brief amount of research shows that the longest rain delay in Major League history was 7 hours and 23 minutes. It happened August 12, 1990, in a game involving the White Sox and the Texas Rangers. In fact, they waited that period to even throw a single pitch. They didn't even start the game. They waited 7.5 hours, and finally they called it off at 2 minutes before 9 o'clock. There were 500 fans in the stands at the end, and when asked about it, White Sox owner Jerry Reinsdorf said, and I quote, "The weatherman kept saying stop," which is a coincidence because that's what we were saying at Principal Park Monday and Tuesday. And that's about all we have for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with some more Paperboyz, and until then, have a good week.